So I knew I wanted to make a Deceit build, which would be primarily weapon damage, but I didn't want to do Hunter Gunslinger, so I decided to slot in Handler instead. And I had to finesse a way where I could get a full magazine, would get the mod back after using it, because using Deceit's mod, for whatever reason, automatically reloads the gun, so you can entirely skip reloads this way. Not to mention, slotting Handler is actually just a really solid choice regardless, because it is 30% range damage on top of the dog howl, which gives 20% additional damage. I think an interesting note with this build is that the Handler archetype will actually outpace Gunslinger in terms of damage output, just because Gunslinger will also increase fire rate, but that doesn't affect Deceit at all, and none of the Gunslinger skills are particularly useful in this fight at all. Obviously, Quick Draw is not very good. Bullet Storm improves fire rate and reload speed, but we're not reloading, and fire rate doesn't affect Deceit. And finally, Sidewinder doesn't matter because Ouroboros automatically reloads Deceit for us. And then I'll dive into a bit more of a complete breakdown into all of my choices, but if you enjoyed this and you hope to see more videos of this type, it would be great if you could like and subscribe. So obviously for my weapons, I picked Deceit because that was the point of this build. I wanted to use it on a boss which has a difficult to hit weak spot or no weak spot at all, so I've picked Dullain. I determined Supercharger is just invaluable due to its charge speed given as well as its extra crit chance. Ouroboros is a great mod just because it forces everything to be a weak spot, which pairs so well with the Hunter due to its increased weak spot damage, as well as Hunter's Focus, which increases weak spot damage more. And Ouroboros, as I mentioned before, automatically reloads the gun upon mod use, which means that if you do it right, you can never actually have to go through a reload animation. For the melee weapon, I use the Hero's Sword, just because you have to do a charged melee attack to get Ouroboros off. Hero's Sword on a charged melee attack will also just hit the boss and do a bit of extra damage. I also picked Reinvigorate just for the charge attacks, 15% additional damage and 10% crit chance. Then for the secondary, I was playing around with different options because you cannot corrode Dullain. So that means that Nebula is out of the question here. It doesn't work. So I was trying different things. I was trying time-lapse to see if I could freeze the ads, but it ended up being better to just strafe and run around them. So the secondary is really not a super important pick in this build. You can slot whatever. For the archetypes and their skills, I picked Hunter because it pairs so well with Deceit's weak spot damage as well as just a ton of ranged damage. So for the Hunter skill, I picked Hunter's Focus just for the ranged and ranged weak spot damage again, as well as crit chance. And then you also get the Mark crit chance, which is just incredible. And an interesting thing is I discovered that every time you exit out of aiming down sights, you lose your focused state, right? And you have to do this every single time you want to proc Deceit's mod, Ouroboros, just so you can get the charged attack again, and you can make all of your shots once again do weak spot damage. And then you aim down sights for a second to get the focus state and the mark again, and that does so much more damage than just not delaying that second. And then obviously we put Hunter in the prime. Then we use Handler just for the 30% range damage, 5% crit chance, and then we get our attack dog skill. And we pick the attack dog skill because obviously it's the skill that's going to be increasing our damage. So for our amulet and rings, let's start with our amulet. I picked Butcher's Fetish just because it pairs really well with Deceit's mod. You have to do a charged attack to fire off the fragments. Butcher's Fetish is one of the best damage amulets, and it procs on a charged melee attack. You could run Bleed and Abrasive Whetstone, and it would technically be slightly better, but I just felt that this pairs so much nicer with the build that I selected Butcher's Fetish instead. We use Burden of the Follower because we need mod power generation to make sure that we can get our Deceit mod for every single magazine that we fire off. If we don't have this, we would empty our mag, have to reload, shoot a few more times before finally getting our mod back. Ring of Flawed Beauty, just because increases ranged weak spot damage by 25%. All of our shots are going to be weak spots. 25% ranged damage is actually very considerable. We use Archer's Crest because Deceit is a fusion rifle. We do want even further weapon charge time, just like we used for our Mutator on Deceit, so we can fire these shots really quickly. And then I slotted in Probability Chord because with this build, our crit chance is almost 100%. And I was mostly just strafing everything. So I put in Probability Chord because Akari's Warband would then only be active for about the first half of the fight unless I purposely ended up iframing an attack later on. So for our Relic and Fragments, I decided to use just whatever relic. I mean, I know I could have used Tormented Heart to get a bunch of mod power over 25 seconds, get Deceit's mod up pretty quickly, and then I could switch Burden of the Follower for some other damage ring, but I decided to not go that route. I've been using Tormented Heart a lot. For the relic fragments, ranged crit chance is just the best one out of all of them for damage. Ranged crit damage is really solid here because, as I mentioned earlier, our crit chance with all of our effects active is almost 100%. And then weak spot damage, all of our hits are going to be weak spots, so this is just a 15% multiplicative bonus to our damage here as well. Our traits are largely unimportant in this build. We get Long Shot from Hunter, which is a really good one, and then I just slotted Fortify, Regrowth, Siphoner just for a bit of extra tankiness. I slotted Glutton because I was trying out different relics to use during the fight, but it's not actually important. Spirit is a big one because we do need mod power generation. And then I had Swiftness and Footwork because I found that strafing all of Dullain's attacks was the easiest thing I could do. For our concoctions and consumables, I used Bottled Shadeberry just for the extra mod power generation. I also used Fairy Needle right at the beginning just to get a bit of extra mod power per second, just to ensure that we are getting Deceit's mod every single magazine. Then at the beginning of the fight, we throw a Brightstone Grenade just to do 10% additional damage and I think it lasts most of the fight just because it lasts 10 seconds after they leave the mist. So as usual, I'm just going to do a quick fight breakdown to kind of explain the steps that I went through to be able to pull this fight off in the way that I did and how my build all functions together. So at the beginning, we're going to do a quick buffing sequence, starting with Fairy Needle because it's going to last the whole fight. It's just going to give us a little bit more mod power per second. Then we're going to go to Ouroboros's, which is Deceit's mod. It's going to last for 30 seconds. We're going to get that off with plenty of time to spare. And finally, Hunter's Focus, just because it's going to be refreshing every single time we get a hit with Deceit. And then finally, we're going to do our Dog skill before entering into the Fog Wall, which is the only buff we're going to use when that's actually going to run out. Upon entering, we immediately throw a Brightstone Grenade to get the 10% debuff and then do a melee charged attack. So now all of our hits are going to be weak spots. And then, as you can see here, after the 6th hit, and if we hit all of our shots, the mod is going to be back up again every single time, and we're going to be able to pop it. It'll reload our gun for us. We do another charged attack, aim down sights again until we pop Hunter's Focus, and then do another full mag. And it's just rinse and repeat, strafing around the arena to dodge attacks. And that's all she wrote, really. It's a pretty straightforward fight with the way that I set it all up. A little bit slower than I would have liked, but I didn't want to absolutely sweat super hard to get the extra bonuses and min-maxing that I could have put on, so I was pretty happy with this overall. And that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.